everybody. Dave Puts here from JKP Holdings. Alongside me in a few seconds will be Nathan Turner. He's running a few minutes behind, guys. But glad to connect with everybody. Excited about this one. There's been a lot of questions around bankruptcy and a lot of curiosities because it's a field that seems to be lost in a lot of the education programs. A lot of times people just don't want to talk about it because they just don't know much about it. So this is a great opportunity to jump in here and kind of talk about things. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to jump in, ask questions, post any things you have problems with or whatever, and whatnot. So hopefully everyone can hear us okay. If you can, I'm seeing a black screen for some reason here. I just want to make sure everyone can see us, connect with us. Let me just make sure this is, if you can see us or whatever, please send me a message. I'm seeing a black rotating screen for whatever reason here. Not sure what's happening here. Let me just jump on and just make sure everything's working out okay. Whatever reason here. Okay. Well, it shows okay on my phone real quick. So I wanted to bring up the fact that bankruptcy has a lot of different aspects to it, a lot of questions to it, and there's some things that we don't need to actually worry about, oddly enough. There are certain things that we don't get involved with and we shouldn't have to worry about. And there's some aspects of it that actually makes it better for us. So for those people who are interested in both, we're going to go over that stuff. We've been at times where we bought a loan and was in bankruptcy. Is that a terrible thing or not? And things like that. So I'm curious what people say. And Nathan said he'll be there in 5 minutes. So he'll be here real quickly. So what we want to do here, guys, is go over what everyone understands, right? And to cover the topics that are interesting and fascinating and problems that you're already going through. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce Tony over here in a second. He's going to go through a slideshow to kind of present what he already knows and what questions have been posted before. In the meantime, as you come up with questions, we'll be monitoring the Facebook feed and we'll post it into his question bank to kind of answer. He's going to go through the slideshow first to kind of cover a lot of the topics, but we're going to move to it. So without further ado, Nathan will be here in a second. Tony, how you doing this Friday afternoon?
I'm great, Dave. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show here. How are you?
Doing well, man. Hopefully everything's going okay in the Midwest with COVID and all that stuff. Hopefully everyone's healthy. And
well, so far so good. And it's the winter's winding down. It is only 35 degrees with a strong wind today, but warmer weather's on its way. That's for sure.
Yeah. So can you give a background where you came from, what you've been involved with, how long you've been doing bankruptcy? I know it's only been 6 months you've been starting this, so but give a little background who you are, what you've been doing, and how you've come into bankruptcy.
Sure. So I graduated law school in 2002 out here in Ohio, and didn't really know what I wanted to get into. I knew I didn't really want to carry somebody's briefcase. I wanted to kind of work for myself in some ways and go to court and kind of get a name for myself going. And there's not a whole lot of areas of the law that you can do that kind of right off the bat. So when I looked into it a little bit more, bankruptcy was one of those areas. And I liked the concept of bankruptcy. I liked the concept of being able to show a client a rule, talk about their problem and how it fits into that rule, and apply that rule, whether it helps or it doesn't help. I got in on the debtor side. So I used to represent debtors and small businesses in Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 bankruptcies. Worked for a very large national law firm doing that, and I was out of Dayton, Ohio. After about 4 years of doing that, I got a little disenfranchised with representing the borrowers and decided let's get in on the creditor side of things. So the rest, as they say, is history. I worked for a couple of larger regional firms here in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. And in 2015 decided, there's just a better way to do this. There's an underserved market out there. Not everybody who holds a note is Wells Fargo or Chase. And there's plenty of regular Joes out there that are buying notes, and I think it's an underserved market. So my partner Franco Barilli and I, we met at a previous law firm, and we decided to start this thing up, and it's been going well ever since.
Awesome. Yeah. Welcome, Nathan. I hope everything's going well. I know you're in a situation you had to get out of, so I appreciate you joining us. So it's awesome to hear you, Tony, because like a lot of investors, when I first got involved, you guys were scary. Dealing with attorneys is a scary thing for investors. And you and a few other attorneys present online the fact that we don't have to be nervous or scared or worried to talk to you guys, that you're not this big bad lawyer that we see on TV that we're nervous about. Shaking your hand, having a bite to eat is not a big deal to have with you guys. And you serve these individuals, small investors, on a daily basis through social media as well as in court. A little bit more about your practice. I know you do one side and Franco does another. Can you share what you guys do?
Sure. So we've kind of split our practice: federal court, which is bankruptcy court, and state court, so foreclosure and eviction. So Franco handles foreclosure and evictions and debt collection. So we do debt collection work as well, wage garnishments, bank levies, things like that. That's all done in Franco's part of the world, which is up in Cleveland, Ohio, Middleburg Heights. And then the bankruptcy side of the house, we handle down here in Loveland, Ohio, which is just outside of Cincinnati. And we practice in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois for everything. So that's foreclosure, bankruptcy, evictions, collections, everything.
Wow.
In those 5 states. And then the additional states of Colorado, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C. for bankruptcy, all bankruptcy in those 3 additional jurisdictions. And then lastly, about 4 years ago, we started a national part of our practice group where we can handle quite a few pleadings in all 94 jurisdictions. So we spent about a year compiling all the information that we would need to file proofs of claim, transfers of claim, the various Chapter 13 notice requirements, things like that, in all 94 bankruptcy jurisdictions. And so we do that from this office as well.
Wow. So those who are confused with POF is, and the motion for relief and stuff like that, he's going to get into that. So, if you're not understanding acronyms and what it means, we're going to get into a little bit about that. We're not going to dive too deep into it. We're not going to do this forever, but for hours on end. But Nathan, what's your experience with bankruptcy? Where are you at with BK?
Oh, BK is driving me nuts. Because I'm an in and out guy. I want to get in and get out of a note as quickly as possible, and BK is not. It is not fast. So for me, they're a headache and a half, and just all the process. And I mean, we're working on a few with Tony's firm right now, where we're waiting for the bankruptcy plan to be presented so that we can then go on to something so that they can not pay, so that I can then foreclose. But it adds extra steps, and it adds months on end when I'm just trying to get a job done. So for me, it's a big headache. I don't like it.
So to add on to that, what I think Nathan says is those people who have non-performing notes, you may get in a bankruptcy, not for a positive thing, but to delay the foreclosure.
Yeah.
Right? They can file BK the morning of. They have 30 days to file their plans, and they probably won't. Right? And then you're back to where you have to go back to the courts, get it all done, and get that thing publicized and get the foreclosure started. So,
and that's been my experience is when they have to present a plan. I don't know that I've ever handled one where they turned it in after 5 days. It's always, 29, 30 days, like they're waiting right to the end, which frankly, if I was in their position, I would do the same thing. But it's, for me, because I'm a short-term, turn it around, that becomes a frustration.
Absolutely. So without further ado, Tony, let's bring up your PowerPoint, kind of show people what we're talking about. Those who are new, again, I'm going to share the chat, any questions you may have with Tony, and we'll let him adjust where he wants to answer things. And I'll put into the chat box we have up here.
Okay, I am not as technologically savvy as I like to be, so hold on a second here. Okay, does everybody see the slideshow?
There we go.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bankruptcy. Okay, we're going to cover some topics today. Let's just kind of outline. We're going to talk about, and honestly, Dave and Nathan are gracious enough to give me an hour or so here. Any single one of these slides we could spend a single hour on. So this is very 30,000 foot view stuff. But But let's get into some of that stuff. So we're going to talk about who the players are in a bankruptcy. We're going to talk about some key differences between 7s and 13s. We're going to talk about lien strips and cram downs, a little bit of timeline, what a Chapter 13 timeline looks like, some common questions that I get quite frequently from note buyers and investors. And the big thing everybody wants to know about is what's this going to cost me? So let's hit up who the players are first, okay? So you've got a whole bunch of people that are involved in the bankruptcy process. You got the U.S. trustee, debtors counsel, creditors counsel, the local trustee, the judge, the debtors. Okay, obviously let's start with the debtors. That's who's filing the bankruptcy. And they've got their attorneys. Some debtors file it themselves. Those are usually kind of pain in the rear end kind of cases, but we call that a pro se filing. We prefer a debtor to have counsel, especially in a Chapter 13 context, because they're pretty complicated. So those are two of the main parties, the debtor and their attorneys. Then you've got the creditors. That's all of us, and creditors counsel. That's me. Okay, so we're kind of the other side of the coin on a bankruptcy. Then you got people that are kind of in the background. You've got the local trustee. That's the one that you're going to deal with the most often, that you hear about when somebody talks about, oh, you've got a good trustee in this case, or oh, this trustee is difficult, or this trustee's rules, or this trustee's attitudes on things. That's who you're really talking about, the local trustee. And for Chapter 13 trustees, there's a few hundred of them across the country. There's usually a couple in every jurisdiction. Then you get the U.S. trustee. That's kind of the boss of the local trustees. The jurisdictions of the United States are divided up amongst regions, and each region has kind of a regional trustee, and then there's a U.S. trustee over all of them. And then you got the judge. If you do things, if you don't get too involved in a case, if there's not a whole lot of complications in a case, you will never see a judge. You may have a hearing. Nowadays, a lot of those are telephonic, which is great. But the vast majority of things that we do in bankruptcy court do not involve a judge. There's a lot of deals that are made. A judge signs off on it, perhaps. A judge puts their signature on it, but there's not a whole lot of interaction with the bankruptcy judge. So that's kind of a who's who in the process. There's a few parties, and when you figure out who they are, that's who you know you're talking with. If we're able to pass these slides around later on, I just kind of gave a rundown here of what I just said. So we can skip that one. So the big ones, the big bankruptcies that you guys are going to deal with are Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. So really abbreviated explanation of each. So a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is a liquidation bankruptcy. When someone says they give up, they're filing bankruptcy, that typically means they're liquidating their assets. They don't have a whole lot of assets. They've got debt. So what's going to happen is they file bankruptcy. A trustee is appointed to the case. The trustee is going to examine the debtor's assets. If there are any, they may have a car, they may have a house, but it's fully encumbered. So they're not really assets. There's nothing that the trustee can take and liquidate into cash to give to creditors. That's what the trustee's role is in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, primarily, is to see if there's anything that he can make money on to give to creditors. Again, typically doesn't happen. I would say 9 out of 10 Chapter 7 cases are what are called no asset cases, and typically take 4 to 6 months. They're very quick, 4 to 6 months. It's the most common chapter of filing. And then one thing you need to worry about in Chapter 7s is that there's no co-debtor protection. So if you've got, debtor 1 and debtor 2 on a property, and only debtor 1 files Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you can continue collecting against debtor 2. There is no co-debtor protection in a Chapter 7 case. So not really that big of a deal with what I typically see from the standard note buyers buying out there, but something to keep in mind. The one we're going to spend a little bit more time on today are Chapter 13s. And the title of a Chapter 13 case is Adjustments of Debts of an Individual with Regular Income. So what you need to glean from that is it's an adjustment of debts. So it's a modification of debts. It's a plan of how they're going to reorganize those debts of an individual. So that means it's a person. It's a natural person or a couple. It cannot be a business. A business cannot file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy with regular income. So that means there needs to be a wage coming in, typically a wage or some type of monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly income coming in that debtor can use to adjust their debts, to pay off some of their debts. It's designed for debtors who have regular income, possibly too much to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. There's plenty of people out there with good money that just still need to file a bankruptcy. We're not going to get into means testing and things like that of whether somebody can qualify for a 7 or they need to go a 13. But typically you could also see people who make a little bit more money in a Chapter 13 case. They take a lot longer. They take about 3 to 5 years, and that's all done through a court-confirmed plan. We're going to talk about plans a little bit more in a bit, but it's what it sounds like, right? It's a plan of reorganization. It's a document that the debtor puts together that says how they plan to reorganize their debts and how they plan to reorganize their assets. Reviewing and understanding that plan is very important. It is critical to the note buyer that they understand and review the plan. There are some debt limits. And again, I've got a to be continued at the bottom of this slide because we're going to really take apart each line on this slide with kind of an individual slide. But there's some debt limits to a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So an individual can't have more than $420,000 or so in unsecured debt and about $1.3 million in secured debt. Those sound like big numbers, but $420,000 is a bad hospital stay. $1.3 million is a small town landlord with a couple of properties. So it's pretty easy to go over the debt limits in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy and not be able to qualify for a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. There's co-debtor protection. So we talked about there not being any co-debtor protection in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. There is in a Chapter 13. So if you've got debtor 1 and debtor 2 who filed a bankruptcy, you've got debtor 1 and debtor 2 on a note, and only debtor 1 filed bankruptcy, you can't do anything to debtor 2. You've got to go into court. Even though debtor 2 never filed, only debtor 1 did, because they're a co-debtor, debtor 2 has protections under the law in that debtor 1's Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So there's more chapters, 9, 11, 12, and 15, okay? Typically, you're not going to see a lot of these. 9 is for municipalities. So that's Detroit, Orange County, California. You're not going to see those doing the note buying work that we typically see in our practice. Chapter 11, we do see a good bit of Chapter 11 bankruptcy work in our bankruptcy practice. It's more from our institutional clients. However, I do see some Chapter 11 work from some of my note buyer clients. Chapter 11 is for the business that needs to reorganize. So we talked about Chapter 13 is only for individuals. If a business needs to reorganize, they file Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's also for the higher net worth individuals. So we talked about the people with too much debt, too much assets, things like that. So we got like Pier 1 filed a Chapter 11, JCPenney, Mike Tyson, Burt Reynolds. So these are people with higher net worths or businesses that need to reorganize. Chapter 12 is for family farmers and fishermen. That's kind of a class unto itself because farmers and fishermen typically are only paid once a year at harvest, maybe twice a year. So Chapter 13, if you remember, required regular income. Family farmers and fishermen don't typically have that. So we do see a good bit of Chapter 12 work, maybe once a month or so. Now, mind you, we're doing about 600 or 700 bankruptcies a month in my firm. So 1 or 2 a month are Chapter 12 bankruptcies. And again, we're in farm country out here in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois. So we do see some family farmers. And then Chapter 15, just very briefly, is cross-border cases. Blockbuster is one such case. So when Blockbuster went bankrupt in the United States, Blockbuster Canada came into the United States and latched on to Blockbuster USA's bankruptcy. And that's called a cross-border bankruptcy. You're not going to see those in your worlds either. So that's why we're not even going to talk about those. Let's get back to Chapter 13, and that's definitely where I want to spend a good chunk of time today. So I want to talk about what's in the plan and what's outside of the plan. Now, we're going to hit up some questions that people posted on the website or on Facebook when we announced this webinar. So when you hear inside the plan or outside the plan, you can kind of correlate that to trustee pay or debtor pay. So the debtor's got a note, they're paying that in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. They're either going to be paying that to the trustee or they're going to be paying it to you. So typically, for shorthand, people say in the plan or not in the plan. I don't like that. Trustees don't like that, but that's kind of the parlance that people use. If it's a trustee pay, if you're getting your money from the trustee, that means it's in the plan. If it's outside of the plan, that means the debtor's paying it directly. I would prefer everything be paid through the Chapter 13 trustee. You may not, but I do, as many of your attorneys, because I can then use the trustee's records to see what came in and what didn't come in, when it came in, the amount that it was. It
thought
helps
that
you
was
with your
actually-
record keeping. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
thought that was illegal. I thought they weren't allowed to pay anything outside the plan.
Oh, it depends. Trustees vary.
Okay.
Trustees vary on that quite often. Some trustees, even if you're behind, they will let the debtor pay directly. Most
who
trustees, if the
chooses-
debtor has any arrears on the property, they'll make that become part of the plan. They'll make that
Who
become a
chooses if
trustee
it's
pay.
paid trustee pay or debtor pay?
What's that?
Who chooses if it's paid by the debtor or through a trustee? Who chooses that?
Well, if it's a jurisdiction where you can pick, then the debtor
Gotcha.
technically picks that. But most jurisdictions have local rules and local requirements as to how that's decided. And typically, it comes down to whether or not there's arrears on the property. If there's arrears, the trustee is going to be paying it. If there's no arrears, then the debtor can pay that. My home jurisdiction, Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio, if the debtor is current on the property, they can pay that mortgage directly. They can pay that note directly. But if they're behind on it, even $1 behind on it, it's got to go through the trustee. We talked about plans a little bit before and how extremely, extremely important plans are. We have a form plan that's pretty much followed all over the country these days, which took many, many years to develop. And you would like to think, because bankruptcy is a federal thing, you would like to think that it's all the same in every jurisdiction, but unfortunately it isn't. You have to review that plan, and you have to understand what's going on in that plan. That's something that your attorneys, if you ask me, should handle. And we can work through that with you and explain to you what we're looking at. But that plan review at the very beginning of the case, as soon as that plan is filed, is critically important. It will outline what that borrower wants to do. Typically, a standard plan is going to say, you know, I owe $10,000 in arrears. I plan to divide that $10,000 by 60 months, pay 1/60th of that $10,000 in arrears every month, plus my ongoing mortgage payment. That's a good plan. There's not a whole lot to object to that. There's not a whole lot of reason to object to that, especially if there's only 10,000 in arrears. If there's 30,000 in arrears, we would want to object to that. Where I see people getting creative, debtors getting creative, is I owe $10,000 in mortgage arrears. Months 1 through 59, I'm going to pay $1 on those arrears per month. And then month 60, I'm going to refinance my mortgage and pay off the rest of the arrears. I see that with regularity. If you don't object to that plan, you're stuck with it. And you're stuck getting $1 a month until month 60. And there's not a whole lot of cases that complete. Only about 35% of Chapter 13 is complete. So you may be stuck in this bankruptcy for 59 months, getting $1 a month because you didn't object to that plan. So plan reviews are very, very, very important from an arrearage perspective, but also from a valuation perspective, okay? You need to understand the valuations that we use in reviewing a plan and what the borrower is going to use in review and putting that plan together. So how did the debtor come up with their value? They're going to typically go to the county auditor. They're going to go to Zillow. They're going to go to what the neighbor down the street sold their house for. They're going to go to whatever they think their house is worth. It may be a good price. It may be a high price. It may be a low price. But the debtor can testify to themselves what they believe the value of the value of their home is. How do you come up with your value of the property? You unfortunately need a little bit more evidence to support that. Hopefully you don't need to, and we can all agree on a valuation. That's what normally happens. We all agree on a valuation of the property, okay? But sometimes we don't, and sometimes you need to get an appraisal done. Sometimes that borrower is going to say that property is only worth $10,000. You think it's worth a heck of a lot more than that. So we're going to talk about getting an appraisal. It might be as simple as a BPO. It might be as simple or as complicated as an interior appraisal that's going to cost several $100. But that's outside the norm. Typically, we're all going to agree on a value of the property.
That's actually what we've got going on, Tony, and this one in Ohio where she claims it's something like $20,000 and we're saying, it's more like 75. So
yeah, and see, that's a big spread. That's a big spread. And the other thing that could mortgage, I'm
Yeah,
sorry?
she's just renting it out. So
That's a problem.
we won't get into it all the way, but
No, we won't, but we're going to cover cram downs, and that's a cram down situation,
okay.
which is probably where we are with that case. So, and that's why valuation is very important. So the type of property, is it residential or rental, and the lien position, first mortgage, second mortgage. Those are very, very important when you're figuring out what your valuation is on the property. We had a question about calculating arrears. This is a good point to talk about that. So, the debtor's going to calculate arrears on a very basic level, okay? They're going to get a statement from their servicer or from their lender that says you're 10 payments behind at $1,000 a month. Your arrears are $10,000, okay? So their bankruptcy.
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, so let's pick back up with calculating arrears. So it's really, really simple for the debtor to calculate arrears. They think they're down $10,000, $1,000 a month for 10 months. So they're going to file their bankruptcy with an arrearage amount of $10,000, $1,000 a month, 10 months in arrears. But we all know that it's a lot more than that, right? Because you've hired a lawyer, you've started foreclosure, you've ordered title, you've done all of these other things, and the arrearage is really more like $20,000. So your arrearage is going to be calculated when you file your proof of claim. So when that debtor files bankruptcy, you get to your attorney and you say, attorney, so-and-so filed bankruptcy. I need you to review the plan. Tell me what it says, and I need you to file a proof of claim. So I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to tell you, I need you to provide me with every bill, everything that was due on this account prior to that bankruptcy being filed. So everything up until that day that that case was filed, we can put on the proof of claim. Well, most things, it's a little jurisdictionally dependent, but most things we can put on a proof of claim up until the day that bankruptcy was filed. So we can put, in many cases, we can put the attorney fees that you've accumulated on the foreclosure. We can put title costs. We can put filing fees. We can put all these other things, the taxes that you've paid, the insurance, because the debtor's not going to know to list that as an arrearage on their property. Your arrearage needs to be calculated and proven down to the penny. When I started this on the creditor side, 10, 15 years ago, I used to be able to say there's $10,000 in arrears and go about my business. But nowadays I have to prove every penny of that $10,000 or my client doesn't get it. So when it comes time to calculating arrears, we need to be very, very precise. If you come to me and say, I did 100 drive-by appraisals in the last year, I'm going to ask you for a receipt for each one of those. So it gets a little technical sometimes. So you may not really care about those because they're $10 a piece or whatever they are. But you've got other fees, other costs. Just give me a copy of the invoice. Give me a copy of the tax bill that you paid. Give me a copy of the real estate insurance that you paid for the property insurance. So that's what I'm talking about when it comes time to our calculating arrears, and we need to be very precise. When payments come in that bankruptcy, and your servicers are going to do this, you need to make sure that the payment, when it comes in from the trustee, it's going to be split. Some of that money is going to be for your ongoing payment. Some of it's going to be for the arrearage payment. You need to make sure that you're tracking what of that payment is going to pre-petition debt, the arrears, or post-petition debt, the ongoing payment. You need to make sure that you're applying pre-petition to pre-petition and post-petition to post-petition. And I put that on here as well, just something for people to think about. Your servicers know this, so apply pre to pre, post to post, and it'll be difficult to get into trouble. The reason why you want to do that is because we talked about briefly a second ago, the success rate in Chapter 13 bankruptcies is pretty low. So when that bankruptcy dismisses and you've got to unwind all of this stuff, much easier to do, because then you can take everything that you applied previously to your pre-petition arrears, and then everything that you applied post-petition all gets applied on the debt that's owed, okay? If that bankruptcy gets dismissed, it all goes back to the beginning. But if that debt bankruptcy gets all the way through, and again, about a third due, okay? If it gets all the way through at the end of that case, that pre-petition should be 100% current, and that post-petition should be 100% current. That does happen. That does happen. I see that every day. That happens.
Hey, Tony. Tony, Kobe Cox here. Got a question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned on this that we need to make sure that gets applied pre to pre, post to post. How do we do that? What's the mechanics of us being able to do that?
Well, your servicer should do that for you. When the check comes from the Chapter 13 trustee, it's going to be outlined by a claim. So we've got a proof of claim that we file. That may be proof of claim 1-1, okay? Well, the trustee has that claim set out 1-1, 1-1A. So when they send you $1,500 that month, they're going to tell you 1-1 is $1,000 and 1-1A is $500. And you will know that 1-1 is your arrearage and 1-1A is your ongoing payment amount. They should split that out for you to allow you to apply that properly.
So is that 1-1A, is that something that will come to us directly from the trustee as the note investor, or do we have to obtain that from the servicer who generally is going to receive that portion of the payment?
Well, that's a good question. However you set up your proof of claim. So if you set up your proof of claim that you, the note holder, want the money to come to you, then that's going to come to you. But if you want it to go to your servicer, and that's where most of it, that's where payments usually goes to the servicer, then the servicer will apply that correctly.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the notification rather than the actual funds. I would want the funds to go to the servicer, of course, but it's trust but verify. So
yeah, you won't get notification from the trustee that a payment was made to your servicer.
And typically, for those who don't understand, is when bankruptcy gets filed, the servicer typically or should push the payment pay to date to be today. They're considered up. They're paid up to today, and they're consistent. They're actually not behind any longer because arrears payment covers the back pay. Where you're going to see the fact that it looks like it's performing, but they're not paid for 3 years. Your next due date should be next month. Oddly enough, and the arrears takes care of everything that was before it was delinquent. But in the eyes of what you see in your system, it will show that the borrower is actually current at this moment. And that's how the services should be recording it.
Cody, you can also get a subscription to the NDC, National Data something. You should be able to track it that way. You can at least see when a trustee sent a payment and the amount that it was. But the trustee is only going to send one notification of that payment. And if you say it goes to your servicer, then your servicer is going to get notification.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tony, are you going to talk a little bit about Pacer later on as well?
Not a whole lot on Pacer. So
Okay.
what we talked about at the very beginning is we kind of had to pick and choose what we talked a whole lot about.
And just summarizing Pacer for everyone who's listening is the system where you can log in and look up if anyone has a bankruptcy filing before or now, see all the documents, all the court hearings. So if you sign into there, they charge you, it's a dime a page. And every quarter, if you have more than $10 worth, they send you a bill. So that's the way you can look up to see if anyone has a bankruptcy, what the details of it, all the documents and everything else, or you just call Tony and he tells you what's going on.
Exactly. But yeah, it's a good idea for any note investor as part of their due diligence when purchasing a note is to run that homeowner's social security number through a Pacer search or some kind of search where you can find out if they filed any bankruptcies and see where that bankruptcy is along in the process. So keep on trucking along. Let's talk about some timelines. Again, talked about this at the beginning. These are going to be very, very broad. No two cases are the same. Every jurisdiction is going to be judge, district, division, trustee specific. I have to say that because I don't want anybody coming back and saying, "Oh, Tony, you said this was going to happen at day 14," and it's not like that. But again, just so you get an idea of the process of a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Okay, so pre-filing, a debtor is going to see an attorney. They're probably going to tell their creditors, "Look, I'm filing bankruptcy." They're going to have to do a bunch of stuff in order to file. On the day they file, that means the automatic stay goes into effect immediately. You can't speak to them anymore. You can't call them. You can't ask them when they're going to make their next payment. As soon as they file bankruptcy, you cannot speak to the debtor directly. You got to go through their attorney. Now, you may accidentally speak to the borrower because you didn't know that they filed bankruptcy. That's fine. Nobody's saying that you're going to get dinged for that. But calling every day and asking where your money is, that's a problem. You got to go through their attorney. On that same day or within a day or two after, a judge is going to be assigned. A trustee is going to be assigned to the case, and things are going to start coming together. So Between day 1 and days 14 and 30, okay, a notice of filing is going to be sent to all the creditors. So if the debtor listed you in their bankruptcy, it's going to go to you that they filed bankruptcy. If it's a recent purchase, if you are just kind of looking at this case, if you haven't sent a hello letter yet, debtors, they sometimes don't understand where their mortgage is. They don't understand, you know, they had to deal with First United Bank, and now Cody Cox owns the note. You know, they don't understand that. So First United Bank may get the notification. So it's difficult. You may not get notification. That's why running PACER searches are making sure you know where the bankruptcy is along the process. Along in the process is a good idea. So by day 14, Nathan, you were saying that or Dave, one of you were saying that plans need to be filed within 30 days. It's actually 14 days. The debtor has 14 days to file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy plan. Okay. By the time that is filed, it's about 2 weeks have passed. You're going to get notice of it. Again, if you're listed in the bankruptcy, you'll get notice of it. And then, in theory, by day 30, they should start making payments. Okay? Especially if they're paying direct. If this is a direct pay situation where the debtor is making their mortgage payments directly, you may never see a stoppage in that payment. You may be dealing with a current mortgage, a current note situation, where the borrower is only filing bankruptcy to pay some back taxes or get a car out of repo or something like that.
Medical, yep.
You know, so you may, especially if it's a debtor pay, you may never miss a payment. You know, may never miss a time coming in. So by day 30, the debtor should be making payments, again, especially if they're paying directly. By about day 45, they're going to have what's called a meeting of creditors. It sounds fancy. Typically, no creditors show up. I haven't been to one in many, many years. It's just a time for a creditor to ask questions of the debtor under oath. We do go to some of them, especially if the debtor's been hiding from us, things like that. But typically, nobody goes to those. If you're going to object to the plan, we talked about those before. If you're going to object to the plan, you really should have done that by now. Fast, you know, forward another 15, 20 days or so, the plan's going to confirm if there's no objections. So you're already 2 months in and the plan is not confirmed yet. Okay. This is not a fast process. You know, like Nathan and Dave, like we were talking about before, nothing about bankruptcy is fast. It is a slow, laborious process. So we're day 60, 70, 75 into this. The plan, if there were no objections, is just now confirming. If there were objections, we're still trying to hash out those objections. We want the value higher. The arrears are off, those kinds of things. All of those objections are going to push out the confirmation date weeks and months later. By about day 70, and it is actually day 70 for what we're about to talk about, you have to have your proof of claim filed. So in 2 months and 10 days from the day that debtor filed bankruptcy, you, the note holder, has to have their proof of claim filed with the courts. There's some exceptions to that. We might be able to file kind of a skeletal proof of claim and be able to finish it 50 days later, but that's for another day. I want you guys to know you have to have your proofs of claim filed in 70 days from the day that bankruptcy is filed. Until that proof of claim is on file and of record, the trustee, if the trustee is the dispersing agent on your payments, the trustee is not going to make any payments because you've not proved your claim. That's what a proof of claim is. A proof of claim is an accounting of the arrears. A proof of claim is proving that you own that note. It's showing the note. It's showing any endorsements. It's showing the assignment. It's showing all of those things that you need to show to prove that you own that note. File it as soon as possible. Do not call me on the 69th day and say, Tony, we want you to file a proof of claim. We're going to do it, but it's going to be a pile of crap, and that's not what you want, okay? You want an accurate, honest proof of claim to be filed. So as soon as that debtor files bankruptcy, get the ball rolling with your trustee on those proofs of claim to get those filed. Get it going as soon as possible, because here's what's going to happen. That debtor may make a couple of payments and then fall out of the bankruptcy. If you've got a proof of claim on file and that debtor falls out of their bankruptcy, you may get a couple of payments because you got your proof of claim in early. It's always a good thing to get your payments, to get your proof of claim filed before the deadline. After day 70, okay, you want to monitor for objections. Sometimes people aren't going to like your proof of claim. So we use the example before of the debtor's going to say there's $10,000 in arrears because it's $1,000 a month and they're behind 10 months. You file your proof of claim showing $20,000 in arrears because you've got the same $10,000 in arrears, but now you've also got $10,000 in costs and fees and stuff that you've accumulated. There could be objections to that proof of claim. You got to watch for those. You should be resolving your plan objections if there are any. And then once that plan confirms, you need to watch for payments, okay? Your servicer will do that. You'll do it. However those payments are coming in, watch for payments. If the debtor falls behind on payments, talk to your attorney. You may want to file a motion for relief from stay. We're going to talk about motions for relief from stay in a little bit. I don't want to get too bogged down in that while we're talking about a timeline, but you may want to file that. You may not want to file that. Again, after confirmation, if there's any payment change that happens because of a rate adjustment or more taxes that are due, those kinds of things, you have to file a notice of payment change with the court. You got to do that 21 days before you want that payment to be a different amount. So that's a notice of payment change. If you are buying or selling a note in bankruptcy, you've got to make sure that a transfer of claim is filed. So you as the buyer of that note in bankruptcy, if you want to get paid on that, you have to transfer that proof of claim. And it's a form that your attorney will fill out for you that says, Joe Debtor used to be paying Chase. Now Joe Debtor needs to pay, me now because now I'm the note holder. And that's a transfer of claim. So that happens after confirmation. If I charge you, because I'm going to charge you for that transfer of claim, I'm going to charge you for these things that we're doing after confirmation. If you're in a jurisdiction where you can assess that fee to the borrower, you've got to file a post-petition fee notice with the court before you can charge the borrower for that. Okay, so that's called a PPFN, post-petition fee notice. We'll talk about those more a little bit later, but again, don't want to get too bogged down in all the alphabet soup of bankruptcy here. So those are all things to think about. Again, post-confirmation, monitor the case. Eventually, if we got a good debtor here who's making their payments timely, the plan's going to complete. The trustee is going to file a notice of final cure saying that all the arrears have been paid. You must respond to that. It's going to say notice of final cure. You have to respond to that and say that you agree or you don't agree. The debtor is going to receive their discharge and the case is going to close. So post-discharge, if the debtor did get a discharge, post-discharge, you need to make sure that the account is updated with all the money that came in from the bankruptcy case. You cannot be collecting on debt that was discharged in the bankruptcy. So if that trustee says, I've made all the arrearage payments, and you don't object to that, you don't respond to that, but you can prove that they actually didn't make 2 of those payments, and you don't respond, and that debtor gets discharged, you cannot go back to that debtor and collect those 2 payments. Those were discharged in the case. Bankruptcies are important to follow all the way through, and you'll be walked through it by the trustee and by what they file with the court and what they send to your attorney who's entered an appearance for you on the case. Okay, that is a very quick timeline. Any single one of those little blue boxes could be their own presentation. But it's important to see, I think, a timeline of bankruptcy.
So let's, before you get to there, at any moment though, if a loan gets transferred from me to Nathan, does that slow down the process? For me, I'm transferring that claim. But for anyone who's new, should they be nervous if any of those steps are not done and that loan is transferring?
No, it's a good idea to maintain. So you've got a note, Dave, and you're selling it to Nathan. You've got a proof of claim on file, Dave. It's being sold to Nathan. Nathan's got to file his transfer of claim saying, I, Nathan, hold the note now. No longer does Dave hold the note. Maintain that relationship between one another because another payment or 2 may go out to you, Dave, instead of Nathan. I see that happen. Trustees miss those. And there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of things coming in and out of a trustee's office. They may miss that. But get those transfers as soon as, that should be part of the onboarding of that loan for Nathan, is for him to get his attorney to file that transfer of claim to get that process started as soon as possible. But typically it's a notice. There's really nothing that happens. Just a notice of transfer of claim. No one's going to
That's-
object to that.
And that's separate from the regular hello goodbye letters.
Correct. The hello
Yeah.
goodbye letters has nothing to do with the bankruptcy case.
Right.
We may attach the hello letter to that transfer of claim,
Yeah.
just so the trustee and the debtor and everybody can see your information, Nathan, how to get a hold of you, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But generally, a transfer of claim is a pretty simple 1-2 page document with maybe an attachment of a hello letter or an endorsed note, something like that.
So
Right.
Tony, 2 questions in the chat here. What if the borrower wants a modified loan in the middle of all this?
Well, that's a slide later on, but I don't think we're going to get to all of our slides. So
That's
we
okay,
might
yeah.
we might want to do a part 2 on this.
Yeah.
Hint, hint.
And then I
Super
guess the
excited.
other question was, do you file transfer claim before you file the assignment, or does not matter? So the assignment's only for county records. This is BK, so they're 2 different. It doesn't matter which way you do it,
Correct.
because as long as you're filing your claim in BK, you still got to file your assignment with the county. That's only for the county records, not do with BK.
Right. Yeah. For a transfer of claim, generally, I don't care about an assignment of claim because that could, or an assignment of the mortgage, because that generally could take some of these counties, especially now during the times of COVID, are months behind. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait for that assignment. Just tell me that it happened. Maybe give me a hello letter, something like that, and that's enough for me. And that's enough for bankruptcy courts. In general, that's enough for bankruptcy courts. If it's ever challenged for any reason, maybe by then the assignment will be done, but we don't need to wait for the assignment to do a transfer of claim. But modification, to answer your modification question, yes, you can do a modification during a bankruptcy. And a bankruptcy is actually, if you ask me, a good chance and a good opportunity to do that,
Yep.
because typically that borrower is going to have an attorney who may be able to help walk them through why that is a good thing for them. The borrower doesn't understand that you did not pay 100 cents on the dollar for this note, and that you may be able to give them a haircut because you didn't pay 100% you didn't pay 100 cents on the dollar for the note. So you can get them into something that's more affordable for them. And you can do that, but you can't talk to them directly. Okay, that's the important thing. You got to go through their attorney. Their attorney may not call you back. You may have to call your attorney. So it sounds simple. Well, it sounds complicated because there's more people in the mix, but it's generally a good opportunity to be able to do a modification if there is one to be done, in my opinion.
The process is simple, but there's just more steps in between because there's more people. That's
Correct. And then because it's in bankruptcy, you may have to modify some things. You may have to file an amended proof of claim because that modification may wipe out all the arrears.
right.
So the trustee can't be paying on mortgage arrears anymore. So you would just need to file an amended proof of claim.
Yeah.
The debtor may want to file with the court a notice or a motion to approve a loan modification. That's typically something that a debtor files. We have some jurisdictions where that's a creditor filed pleading, but that's kind of ridiculous for that to be a creditor filed pleading. That
And
should be
so
a debtor filed pleading.
And so for
Um,
investors too, you can talk to the BK attorney, right? The
Correct.
debtor's BK attorney, and you can also call the trustee up, right? So I wouldn't advise doing it, but you can speak to the trustee and say, listen, I want this. I typically go through my servicer or my attorney to ask for the ledger or whatever he asked for.
Yes.
But you can speak to the trustee and say, listen, I want the ledger and proof of payments. You can ask for that. So that could show you what payments have come in.
Yeah.
But yes, don't talk to the borrower. If they call you, just say, listen, I can't speak to you right now. You have an attorney representing you.
Yep.
And they may say, listen, all I want to do is modify my loan. Then you just direct them, hey, listen, talk to your attorney.
Yep.
Have them call my servicer and we'll go from there.
That's exactly right. Or send you some kind of permission on their letterhead that says you can talk to my client for the purposes of a loan modification.
Yep.
That's generally what happens because these attorneys don't want anything to do with that for their client.
Yep.
They want you to be able to talk directly with them. They want to get out of the way just as much as you want them out of the way. So they'll give you authority for either you or your servicer to talk to them about that.
So let's get to seconds here, right? Or sometimes first, but I would say mostly seconds on cram downs.
Okay, so very briefly on cram downs, okay? Cram downs, it's a big reason why people file Chapter 13 bankruptcy. It's reducing a secured interest to the value of property, okay? Happens all the time with personal property. It exists only in Chapter 13 cases, not Chapter 7 cases. A debtor can cram down a non-primary residence, but then they must pay off that entire debt within the plan term. And let's be honest, that's impossible to do. We do not see these with any regularity whatsoever. We do proofs of claim. We probably do 100 proofs of claim a month. maybe one of those has that debtor paying off that claim within that 5-year term. It just doesn't happen, okay? So generally speaking, you're not going to see a cram down happen in a Chapter 13 case on non-primary non-primary residents like that. So, but you may be very happy if they can cram that down in a 13 again, because you probably didn't pay 100% of what the note's face value is.
Right.
I want to skip that example. It's not a big deal. I want to talk about strip offs, okay? Because a lot of people are buying seconds right now. I see seconds talked about all the time in our Facebook groups here. So when a lien on a property is wholly unsecured, okay, I just want to walk through the definition here. The lien may be stripped off and made unsecured. So we're really talking about junior liens here, primarily second mortgages. So here's my example. The value, we talked about how important value is, okay? The value is determined at the beginning of the case in the debtor's plan. So looking at that debtor's plan, the value of the residence was determined to be $150,000 in this example, okay? The first mortgage is for $160,000. You have a second for $40,000. That second mortgage is able to be stripped, and that's some scary stuff, okay? Because that's why value is so important. If you can show the value of that house was $161,000 and the first mortgage is only $160,000, your full second mortgage is paid. You can't strip any of it off. If even a dollar of equity is present, the debtor cannot strip that off. I can't stress to my clients enough, especially those in the second mortgage space, how important a good valuation at the beginning of the case can be later on. Okay, so that's what you need to keep in mind. There needs to be equity for your mortgage to survive that case. But here's the deal. Debtors have to file to strip off that mortgage. They may be able to do it by motion, but they may have to do it by an adversary proceeding. Again, not going to get into the mechanics of either of those, but the debtor must file for that to happen. So you may know that you have a strippable lien. You may say, oh yeah, I mean, this is garbage. I paid 5 cents for it, you know? But at the end of the day, I still would suggest you file a response to that debtor's motion to strip off your lien. Yes, that is spending good money after bad, and I'll be the first to say, don't pay me if you don't have to. I will turn down work. But this is a situation where I would tell you, let's file a response, because that response is going to indicate how all of this is going to happen. We are not going to cancel that lien unless and until you get a Chapter 13 discharge. If your case converts to a Chapter 7 case, the lien remains. We are not canceling that lien unless and until a series of things happen. You want all of that in black and white. And then if they do get a discharge, you want that agreed order to be able to be used at a closing, or with the title agency, or with the county recorder's office, to be able to say, I don't have a second mortgage on that property anymore. That agreed order may say upon discharge, the lender will issue a satisfaction of mortgage. It will say whatever all the parties agree to. But if it doesn't say anything, and that debtor filed a motion to strip off the mortgage, and the judge signed an order that said the mortgage is stripped, is it stripped then? When is it stripped? We have a real problem on our hands here if we don't get good language on record with the case. That may be how you sell you may be able to resell it. You know, always an agreed order. I do not like default orders to be entered for any of my clients. Even if we want what the borrower is asking for, still reply, still get an agreed order on file. So that's kind of stripping off liens.
So just so people know, now that the lien is stripped, it's now an unsecured debt. The debt's
Correct.
still present, it's just not secured by the property.
It's just not secured by the property, right? So you don't have to release it until the debtor's discharged, though. And that's the thing. A lot of people think that as soon as they file bankruptcy, or as soon as they file that motion, they don't have to do anything. It's stripped off. It's not. It's not. They have to take additional steps. The attorney for the borrower directly, has to take an additional step to strip off that junior lien.
But that debt's still on the books, not secured by anything. That debt could be on the books forever as a debt owed by the I guess the no, okay.
No, not if it's discharged. Not if they get a discharge.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, if you have a first, now here's where you may be thinking, Dave, if you've got a first and the debtor gets a discharge of their debt, you can then foreclose on that first mortgage.
Yes.
You just can't get a judgment against the borrower because that debt was discharged. So yes, that debt kind of stays on the books with the county, but you get the property back in a foreclosure sale.
So
Okay.
if it's a second and you get stripped and you have a first and second, that second gets stripped, the liens on the property is still first and second, or is that second completely off the county books?
Depends what you put in your agreed order.
Yeah. So guys, this one I want to make sure you're clear that stripping of the lien is important. So if you're looking at an asset and you're not reviewing the bankruptcy court and you know they have the bankruptcy filing or don't, you better be looking at this to make sure the second lien has security still.
Yes.
Or you're buying blank debt.
Just know what you're buying.
Yeah.
Know what you're buying.
And unsecured can still be collected on. And Tony, do you guys do that?
I'm sorry?
Do you collect on unsecured debt?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We file unsecured proof of claims for proofs of claim for a lot of our auto lenders. So they've already repoed the car. They've sold the car. We're filing a proof of claim for an unsecured balance. Typically, you're getting a few pennies on the dollar. You're not getting a whole lot, but you're getting something.
It's something. Yep.
It's something. And then that debtor's got to be in that bankruptcy for at least 36 months. Typically, again, broad generalities here. And if not a lot of claims are filed, you may get a lot more than that couple of pennies on the dollar.
Right.
So always good to file a proof of claim.
Yeah.
So let's zip through a couple of other questions that I saw on the Facebook page here. Don't like your plan treatment. We got to look for the valuation of the property and how the debtor uses that property. We talked about that at the beginning of this presentation.
Yep.
Debtors cannot cram down a first lien on residential property. Okay. What if you're not getting paid? Okay. You're not getting paid. Well, should you be? Was a proof of claim filed? If this is a trustee paid jurisdiction and no proof of claim was filed, you are not going to get paid. So you may buy a loan, no proof of claim was filed, and you wonder why you're not getting paid. Well, you shouldn't be getting paid because no proof of claim was filed. So these are all things that your attorneys can walk you through and determine why you're not getting paid. More often than not, a proof of claim was filed. The trustee's just not getting money from the debtor. Perhaps, in our scenario before where Dave sold a loan to Nathan, perhaps the trustee just didn't see that transfer of claim. Dave's been taking the money all along and he's telling Nathan to take the, take a walk on the highway, buddy, we got to figure out that and get that corrected. So here's a situation where you may or you may not want to file a relief from stay. Okay. You're not getting paid, but the trustees also filed a motion for a motion to dismiss the case because you're not getting paid because the trustee's not getting paid. Mm-hmm. So you may come to me and say, Tony, I want to file for relief from stay. And I may tell you, look, don't waste your money. This case is going to get dismissed. Why bother? Yeah. Or I may tell you, look, I know this trustee, they're going to give this debtor another bite of the apple every single time. Let's file for relief from stay.
So those are people understanding the stay is a stay from foreclosure or filing any kind of legality to take the property back. So the stay is the word for saying you can't file foreclosure on it. So you want relief from that pause so you can move forward with the foreclosure. And now most relief is an expensive feature, especially if you're dealing with a loan that has a $200 a month payment. Right? So you get $200 a month and your relief estate could be $950 or so, depending on the jurisdiction. And that's 5 months of payments. And if you could just wait a month and the trustee can file it for you, you're saving that money.
Yes. And that would be something that I would talk about with my client when they came to me and said, should I file? Well, I'm only getting $200 a month. Well, in a Chapter 13, a motion for relief from stay is $1,050 plus $186 in filing fees. So you're $1,300 into a motion for relief from stay, and it may just not be worth it. You may just want to wait out the bankruptcy. I don't get happy clients that way. I mean, they're happy that they're saving money, but they're not happy that they have a note that's not making any money for them. So let's see here. So filing for relief from stay, Dave, like you just talked about, it gets the property out of the bankruptcy estate. It allows you to either commence or restart whatever probably got the debtor to file bankruptcy in the first place. So you probably started foreclosure, you've started a forfeiture, you started an eviction, whatever you're doing. They filed bankruptcy, the stay went into effect, it stays all of those proceedings. You're looking for relief from that stay to be able to proceed in state court. Usually motions for relief from stay are resolved with an agreed order. That agreed order may result in more payments coming your way. When I file a motion for relief from stay, I will almost always entertain an agreement because I know the judges want an agreement to be reached. Sometimes the borrower just says, I give up, I don't want it, I'm not paying on it anymore, and take the house back. But I know a judge every single time, 10 times out of 10 times is going to say, no, creditor, you're going to accept, we're going to reach some kind of settlement here. I'm going to order you to take an extra $100 a month until the arrearage is caught up that accumulated during the bankruptcy. I want to get in front of all of that. I'm going to go to you and I'm going to say, look, they're $600 behind. Let's take an extra $100 a month for the next 6 months. But here's what I'm going to do in that agreed order. I'm going to say, if that debtor ever falls behind again, I don't have to start this process again. I don't have to waste my client's money and spend another $1,050 and a filing fee. And I want to just be able to file a notice of default with the court. And I want to be able to go back to the court and say, they have defaulted on our agreed order. An agreed order doesn't cost you any more filing a motion for relief from stay. At least I don't charge for those. An agreed order is going to say, we're not going to have to do this again if the debtor falls behind again. So that is very, very generally what filing for relief from stay is going to get you.
And when,
you
if you're
get
starting,
this, I want to make sure people. So
Sorry,
I
Sam,
wanted
you
to
say
make
yours.
sure we
go ahead, Dave.
mute Woodward. So dismiss versus discharge is very commonly confused. Just quickly, I know you're going to get into here. Dismiss and discharge. How would you define it?
Okay, so 2 words, look kind of the same, sound kind of the same, could not mean more polar opposite in a bankruptcy context. If a case gets dismissed, it's over, done. You are back in the position you were in before that bankruptcy was filed. If you are able to reset that foreclosure sale for the day after that dismissal order is entered, you can do that. You have to give the debtor credit for any money that you would have gotten during the bankruptcy. But at the end of the day, if that dismissal hits, you're done. There's no more bankruptcy. There's a bankruptcy on their record, but there's no discharge. A discharge is what that debtor's looking for in a bankruptcy, and it's a discharge. It's an absolution of their debt that they wanted to get rid of in the bankruptcy. So a discharge means you can never collect that debt again, period. So you can foreclose on your property, you just can't collect any deficiency on that foreclosure from that borrower if that loan is discharged in the bankruptcy, if that loan is absolved, and if the borrower is absolved from that loan in the bankruptcy when they receive that discharge.
Right.
I'm going to skip repeat filer and how often people can file. Collection of your attorney's fees from the debtor. Sometimes you can pass my fees along to the borrower. It's going to depend on jurisdiction, and your attorney will know the answer to whether or not that can happen. It varies widely, and oftentimes it won't be for what your attorney charges you for things. So a proof of claim is $950. A proof of claim and plan review is $950 plus $250 if I have to fill out what's called Form 410A. Again, not going to get into all of that. Just realize that's $1,200 that I'm going to charge you for this. That's the Fannie Mae fee. That's what we pass right along to all of our clients. It provides a lot of clarity. It's easy to understand. The Southern District of Indiana will allow you to get, I think it's $500. I can't remember exactly what it is, from the borrower. So I'm not lowering my fee to $500, but you can go to the borrower and say, you owe me $500 because I had to pay Tony $1,200 to file that. More jurisdictions allow you to collect it all. And again, whether or not the debtor is going to pay, you just never know. But you have to file a notice of post-petition fee, expense, or charge to get that going. And that's something that your attorneys can do for you. Can I sell or buy a note in bankruptcy? Yes, we do it all the time. We talked about that. Can I modify a loan in bankruptcy? Yes, you can. We talked about that. So I talked about some costs involved. I think everybody at this point really understands that our office And most other firms that do what we do are going to follow the prevailing Fannie Mae fee schedule for whatever foreclosures cost and for whatever bankruptcies and evictions. It's just easier. It's just easier for everybody. I don't want Nathan to ever think I'm giving Dave a deal because Dave gave me 2 files this month. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's clarity, and it's something that anybody can look up and see what the prevailing Fannie Mae fee schedule is. So these are just some very common pleadings and what they cost. Okay, and that's as of yesterday, right? Or the day before, whatever. Yeah, yesterday.
So if you guys have any side questions, we're going to kind of cut this short. We have some technical issues, of course. If you have questions, put in the chat, and we'll answer them as we can. I apologize. Some going on with Facebook connection with Zoom, just weirdly enough. But, you know, understand bankruptcy is a lot more than this. We're kind of rushing through a lot. Even the stuff of repeat filers and what you can do about them is a whole nother conversation. And unless you're in Florida, which they reject those kind of claims a lot, most of the time you can get out of a situation where a person repeat files. So Tony's going to review some of his slides here to decide which ones you should hit on last. If you have questions, specific questions, that's always best. You can post them, you can email them, you can reach out. If you have them right now, we can answer real quick. But understand the fact that bankruptcy nationwide is generally the same steps, procedures, everything else. The costs differ from state to state a little bit, but most of the time it's the same. Also understand the rules behind the bankruptcy is identical throughout the country. You should not be interacting with people you shouldn't be. And if you have questions, reach out to your bankruptcy attorney. We're having a plan problem with one of our assets. It's in Tennessee, and they're working through getting that solved. I will tell you that we've had many times where the judge kicks the bucket down the street when they should be dismissing it. I don't want to spend $1,200 to get a file out of BK when my payment's $150 a month. I'm hoping the trustee will come through, and we usually give about 3 months for that to happen.
Dave, were there any questions in the chat?
Nothing yet, which is awesome. I mean, I know we have a bunch of people on here. If there is anything particular, feel free to reach out to Tony, social media, email, or whatnot. He's put himself out there a lot. Nathan, have you had any questions recently that came up in your circle?
Nothing that comes to mind immediately. I would actually go back and look at a couple of my BKs and just see. I think, you know, as much as we go through in this and there's extra steps and there's extra time and everything else, it doesn't mean they're not worth anything.
Yes.
They're still viable notes. I know, Dave, you like them better than I do, but
So one of the big things about bankruptcy, and that, you know, I know the bigger funds love this, is that you're not only getting that $225 payment a month, you're also getting an additional possibly $100, $200 a month in arrears. And you're getting it maybe for 3 years, maybe for 5 years, you're getting an extra kick. And when that kick is over, you can sell a loan, right? You bought it at a 12 yield, whatever, plus the bonus is getting you a 15 yield, and then you're selling it at a 11, 12 yield in 3 years. So during that time period, you jumped it up, take advantage of the arrears coming in.
So
I see a lot of people wanting to buy loans in bankruptcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't see any questions here, guys. I do want to thank Tony for dealing with all the craziness and going through a very difficult, confusing field as best as you have. You guys are really awesome to work with. And, you know, it's interesting because bankruptcy and foreclosures are two different worlds, where we don't like work with like Illinois County for foreclosures, but bankruptcy is a completely different animal. That it's not something to be afraid of like you are with Cook County with foreclosures. So reach out, talk to them if you have questions. But other than that, man, I'm good.
And we're moving to Cook County slowly. No sales, but now we can get to judgment.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
exciting.
Awesome.
It's getting there.
So yeah, so reach out anytime. You know, I recognize a lot of the names that signed up for this. So, you know, if we're not connected, connect with me, connect with our page. We put out some stuff online. We don't put a whole lot out there, but we're always pretty available. If I can't answer your question, I'll get somebody to help you out. You know, Franco and I kind of split, my law partner and I, Franco Barilli, we kind of split our practice. state court versus bankruptcy court, and it works out real well for us. So let us know what we can do for you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tony. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dave and
Nathan,
Nathan, for
for
this
joining us.
opportunity.
And
Yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
be talking soon. We have some great episodes coming up in the next week as well. Me and Nathan work behind the scenes. We're gonna be talking about joint venture topics. We're gonna be talking about creating from a more CFD to a note. Some of these awesome, interesting topics that people are really intrigued by. So stay tuned for those. The information will be coming soon. So thank you very much, guys. If you have any questions, reach out to Tony, reach out to myself, and hit up Nathan as well. Thank you,
You bet.
everybody.
Anytime.
Thanks.
Take care and have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Tony.